Hi, I'm Alaiyah.
And I'm Simon.
And we're here to talk about one amazing woman.
And her work in civil rights.
Josephine Baker.
Josephine Baker experienced many forms of discrimination as a black woman in the U.S. during a period of extreme racial conflict.
Josephine Baker used her fame and influence to demand integration and speak out against discrimination on the March on Washington.
Josephine Baker's ambitious and rebellious actions inspired millions of people to stand up and fight in the civil rights movement.
Josephine's story is one of conflict and compromise.
Conflict?
And compromise?
Hey, we know what that is. Who are you?
Duh, were you? In a different color shirt. Oh, makes sense.
So, we can do the conflict and compromise?
I guess so.
Yes! Ready?
Ready. Let's go. Conflict.
We've been compromised.
Whoa. That's not the conflict and compromise we're talking about.
You know what? Let's just show you.
Let's back up a bit. Before Josephine Baker was born. The American Civil War ended in 1865 and slavery was abolished. Still, people of color were oppressed and barely had any rights.
Jim Crow laws were put into place in 1896 to continue to oppress African American people. These laws separated services and access to colored and white youth.
Schools and buses were separated to deny African American fair education and access to public transportation.
People of color had no voting rights and little to no access to jobs that used any intellectual skill, provided fair wages, or governmental power.
No governmental power meant no way to change the unfair laws put in place.
Lynchings and other demonstrations of white supremacy were frequent, as were groups like the Ku Klux Klan. Established in 1865, the same year slavery was abolished.
With little hope of the situation getting better, the people turned to the arts, using song and dance to express themselves.
Josephine was born Frida Josephine McDonald on June 3, 1906 in St. Louis, Missouri, a largely African-American community. Her family were mostly performers, a fact that would greatly influence her in life.
One horrible day, young Frida witnessed something she would never forget. She saw black people running from their houses on fire and white people in a craze beating them into the pavement, and the police just watched the whole thing.
She dreamed big for her future and wouldn't settle for anything less. She fought her way through unfair discrimination during early work and horrible treatment throughout her childhood, but she persevered and started performing for audiences through dance.
With 2 divorces behind her and a fresh new start, she's launched her career as Josephine Baker, but struggled with her race. As a light-skinned woman, she could only perform blackface for a white audience.
So she moved to Paris in hope of finding a place where she could perform as a black woman and not suffer discrimination.
She hit big. The French audience loved her and didn't care about her skin color.
She was performing for the richest of all people. She soon became the highest paid person in all of Europe.
She was breaking all the barriers for a black woman in her time. She was the first African American woman in a colored talking film, Princess Tam Tam. She became one of the most photographed women in the world.
This amazing performer was so comfortable in her body that she performed nearly naked in her famous banana dance. She blocked out the American haters who thought she was either too young, too skinny, or too black to perform.
It wasn't all easy going though. Baker still felt compelled to treat her skin with lemon, bleaching it, and she powdered her face white before every performance to appeal to her audience.
This woman had to overcome some huge obstacles. America, for instance, could not handle a woman of color with such sophistication as Baker to be in power.
She traveled to New York to perform with the Ziegfeld Follies and received vicious and racist reviews, one of which called her nothing more than a Negro wench.
Josephine hit back, returning to America years later and declared that every club she performed for would be integrated or she would personally attack the heads of the clubs.
Only Josephine Baker had the courage to stand up against a racist and oppressive government, but her work was far from over.
Josephine continued to push the envelope. She participated in World War II as a spy for the French and received the Legion of Honor and the Medal of Resistance, the highest military honor France gives. Take that, America.
A black woman with more power than all y'all. Okay, settle down. There's much more. Sorry, it's just... I know. It's a lot to take in. She did so much in one lifetime.
Yeah, she also adopted 12 children, all of different ethnicities, races, and religions, proving that all these people can live together as one family. She called it her Rainbow Tribe. But this is not the height of our amazing story.
No, her most influential act is still yet to come.
I want you to know that this is the happiest day of my entire life.
Josephine Baker was invited to one of the biggest and most influential civil rights movements of history, the March on Washington. on August 28, 1963.
She stepped up to the stage wearing her military honors and her head held high, facing the National Mall filled with an ocean of black and white faces alike.
250,000 people had come to show their support in the civil rights conflict, Josephine's biggest audience.
Civil rights activists gathered from across the nation to inspire the crowd. Men like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis, and Ron Wilkins spoke powerful speeches.
2 women, Marian Anderson and Alaiyah Jackson, sang, but only one woman spoke, Josephine Baker. She had the power to influence the whole world with her speech, and she did.
She talked about her hardships with overcoming the people who sought to bring her down, and how hard she pushed back.
Her experiences as a black woman in her time,
and how the U.S. treated her. She wasn't afraid to give an honest piece of her mind. She was fed up with the way she was treated in America. She is Josephine Baker, and she is a celebrity. In her own words,
"You know, friends, that I do not lie to you when I tell you I have walked into the palaces of kings and queens, and into the houses of presidents, and much more. But I could not walk into a hotel in America and get a cup of coffee, and that made me mad. And when I get mad, you know I open my big mouth. And then, look out, because when Josephine opens her mouth, they hear it all over the world."
And here they did.
Her speech told how she spoke against discrimination, and how she used her status as a famous performer to do it.
She boldly demanded, speaking up for women in the civil rights movement, using her words to go where no African American woman had ever gone. She stood up to the oppressive white government and made it be known that she would not back down. Josephine Baker's speech didn't just say that African Americans stand together. She said that African American women stand together as well.
During her speech, Josephine introduced the Negro Women Fighters for Freedom, a group that highlighted on the women of the civil rights movement.
The March on Washington led to many more protests within the following months.
Dr. King and other influential civil rights activists were able to talk with President Lyndon B. Johnson and led to 2 civil rights acts the next 2 years.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed discrimination based on color of your skin, religion, or sex, and then the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which allowed African American men to vote. It was a turning point in the civil rights fight for freedom.
Women weren't always at the forefront of the movement, but Josephine gave black girls someone to look up to. This speech inspired women across the whole country to stand up and fight.
Josephine Baker integrated the American stage. Because of her, there are many more inspirational black females in the entertainment industry fighting for civil rights every day.
There are women in film like Oprah Winfrey, winning the Golden Globe Cecil B. DeMille Award.
That a new day is on the horizon.
The first woman of color to win this Lifetime Award, and movies highlighting the lives of black women fighting for their rights like Hidden Figures.
There are stories about African American people in the theater too, like The Color Purple, Dreamgirls, and Shuffle Along.
The integrated stage has changed African American life in many ways for the better.
Absolutely right, and we aren't the only ones who know all Josephine Baker has done.
Yep, the NAACP dedicated May 20th to Josephine Baker to honor all she has done for African Americans in the U.S.
The Josephine Baker story was made in 1991 by HBO to tell the story of her amazing life.
And Beyonce did a tribute to Josephine Baker, wearing a banana skirt during the 2006 Fashion Rock Show.
The Women's March in New York on January 21st, 2017 is a prime example that her work is still with us today.
Women everywhere draw on the courage and experiences of Josephine Baker to help them find strength in their own lives.
Although we still have a ways to go, Josephine Baker put us in the right direction.
Women everywhere are taking a stand and following the path that Josephine Baker built for us.
Josephine Baker's speech at the March on Washington inspired millions of people, especially women of color. She never compromised her values while climbing to stardom.
Throughout her life, she broke the social norms, from dancing topless in the banana dance to becoming the first colored woman in film.
Conflict was a part of life for African American women in the early 1900s in America.
The odds were stacked against us.
But she used her fame to fight for civil rights in ways many African Americans couldn't.
She made it possible for young black girls to see people like them succeed.
The influence she had in this country was unstoppable.
Even when she died on April 12, 1975, we continue to learn and grow from her examples as a star, a freedom fighter, a community builder, a strong African American woman, and mother.
We will not forget all that she has sacrificed for us.
And we will not stop standing up and fighting for what we believe in.
And I'm feeling good.